I'm really happy to welcome Miranda Devine to the podcast. Miranda is an investigative reporter with the New York Post. She's the author of a forthcoming book coming out this fall, Laptop from Hell. She is on the Hunter Biden story, but I don't really want to call it the Hunter Biden story because I think it is actually the Joe Biden story. Miranda, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. Let's start with a bombshell revelation that you had in the New York Post. You placed Joe Biden, I would say, at the scene of the crime. And what I mean by that is at a face-to-face meeting with a whole bunch of Hunter Biden's corrupt buddies, including top executive at Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company that was paying this dude $83,000 a month for basically nothing, for being a Biden and for being perhaps the bag man for the big guy, Joe Biden. Talk a little bit of, first of all, how did you make this discovery that has evidently gone missed by the entire media, and then talk about the significance of it.
Thanks, Dinesh. Great to be with you. Look, it is a bombshell event because there you have Joe Biden meeting not one of Hunter's clients, which we already knew he had because we had the email from Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop that was from his benefactor at Burisma, a guy called Vadim Pozorowski, saying, thank you for introducing me to your father to have a meeting and spend some time with him. So we knew that had happened, but we didn't know how or when. And you know, the White House and Joe Biden's campaign is never forthcoming. They didn't exactly deny it, but they said that this meeting with this Burisma executive was not on his official diary of the time. Well, we found many emails, and I'm cross-referencing not just the laptop, but the material Tony Bobulinski has given me, also the material that's in the Senate Republican inquiry last year, all those Treasury reports of suspicious activities, this money, millions of dollars sloshing into accounts of businesses associated with Hunter Biden. So when you cross-match everything, suddenly more gems pop out, and this was one of them. And it's a dinner at Cafe Milano, April 17, 2015. And it was a 3-for-1 deal as far as Hunter was concerned. He had clients from Russia, from Ukraine, and from Kazakhstan who were all giving him millions of dollars. And Joe Biden showed up to just be there, to be the presence there. We don't know what was said, but we do know he was there.
Now, Joe Biden has said, I'm now quoting him, I have never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. Doesn't the mere presence of Joe Biden at this kind of a meeting show that statement has got to be flatly false?
Absolutely. And it's one of many statements that Joe Biden has made over the years, defending himself and saying that he knew nothing about his son's business dealings, which obviously were all about him because Hunter Biden didn't bring anything to the table personally. He was a crack addict. Everyone can feel sad about that, but his personal life was in shocking disarray. He split with his wife. He was having an affair with his brother's widow. That was tempestuous in itself. He was back and forward to LA, staying at the Chateau Marmont on crack benders. His behavior was so out of control, he was even black banned from the Chateau Marmont. So this is not someone that you would really be willingly paying millions of dollars to be part of your business unless you were getting something else. And that was, of course, the influence of Joe Biden, who was then vice president and had carriage over policies in many of the countries, or all of the countries, that Hunter Biden was monetizing with his uncle, Joe's younger brother, Jim Biden, who is, I'm told, the brains of the operation.
Now, I think this is the key point, that although people are focusing on, quote, the Hunter Biden story, I just saw Bill O'Reilly says, something like Hunter Biden is a lost soul. I think that's somewhat to miss the point because the son, Hunter Biden, and the brothers, Jim Biden, and also Frank Biden, who was operating in South America, Costa Rica, places like that, I mean, these were the bag men for Joe Biden. So it seems to me that while the Clintons had a foundation, and that was kind of the conduit for for foreign money flowing into the Clinton coffers. Biden set up his operation a little bit differently. It was a little bit more Corleone style, operate through La Familia, so to speak. And so this isn't really a Hunter Biden scandal, is it? Isn't it a Joe Biden scandal? The man in the White House has enriched himself and has all these multiple homes and multiple mansions and so on because his net worth soared dramatically over his career because he was taking huge dollops of money from multiple foreign governments, including China.
It is a Biden story. Joe Biden himself has operated like this from his very earliest days in Delaware. It's called the Delaware way. It's just this cronyism, quid pro quo, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's how he, managed to get jobs for family members, particularly for Hunter, very lucrative jobs, get into the Yale, get himself these mansions that he lived in. It's all just donors being friendly to him. It's, was very well known in the early days that if you help Joe's family, you're helping Joe. So it's an extended family situation. It's this great mantle of privilege that's accorded to anyone with the name Biden. So it's his nieces and nephews and, definitely his children. And Hunter was anointed by his father very early on as the moneymaker. So sadly, his son Beau has died, and he was really the golden boy who was Attorney General of Delaware, set to Joe had him planned to go to the White House. And he's spoken of that himself. And sadly, his life was cut short because he had cancer and died in 2015. But the plan had always been that Hunter would make the money for the family so that Beau could concentrate, and Joe could concentrate on being squeaky clean. I mean, Joe describes himself as the poorest member of Congress, and yet he lives like a billionaire. So it's done just, by bills being paid. He doesn't really have any bills because all those bills get sent to Hunter, and Hunter has complained. We have an email on the laptop. He said to his adult daughter at one point, at least you don't have to give half your income to Pop, meaning Joe. And we know, in other cases, certainly when Joe was leaving the vice presidency, he wasn't dumb enough to take cash while he was vice president, although his family took millions. But it was after he left that he was, Hunter had organized for him to go into business with him and CEFC, which is the billionaire chairman Xi Jinping, who now has disappeared, thought to be dead in China. And he was the head of this Chinese investment conglomerate that Hunter was in a joint venture with. And this is where Tony Bobulinski came in. And of course, Hunter and his uncle Jim decided to rip off Bobulinski and another partner, James Gilliar, and go and do it themselves. And when Bobulinski saw the Senate report and saw these millions of dollars sloshing in from China into associated accounts, he twigged that he had been ripped off, and that was, sparked his revelations. But
now, Miranda, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to jump in here. I want to ask you a question about the Washington Post, because it seems like we're in an age where the media, far from investigating these stories, tries to work to cover up for the Bidens. And here you have Glenn Kessler, the so-called fact checker of the Washington Post. I want to fact check Glenn Kessler a little bit here, because he essentially says, no big deal. He says, first of all, the reason this wasn't on Biden's schedule is he, quote, just stopped by at the last minute. And so there's an effort here to minimize the story, to imply that he wasn't here to talk about any business dealings at all. So give us the scoop on Glenn Kessler and what he's trying to do and why he is deliberately missing the point of what you were reporting.
Well, it is deliberate. It was astonishing to find that so-called fact check. Because all it did was try and minimize any potential wrongdoing by Joe Biden. It was really carrying water for Joe Biden. And why? Extraordinary, and factually incorrect. We published the guest list that Hunter had written to his friend Devon Archer for this upcoming dinner a month before. And on that list were the Kazakhstanis, ambassadors, the Russians, in fact, including Elena Baturina and her husband, the former corrupt mayor of Moscow, who had wired $3.5 million into an account of an associated business. So, and of course the Ukrainians. So it was pretty obvious. We'd written down that Vadim Pozharsky, the Ukrainian executive from Burisma, was on Hunter's guest list from the first days. And yet Kessler says, oh, and Vadim isn't even on the guest list. And I'm like, did you not read the story? How can you fact check a story that you haven't read? And there were lots of other omissions. And he basically tried to characterize it as a last minute thing when Hunter had said, more than 2 weeks beforehand to the guests that Dad would be coming, but don't tell anyone. It was planned in advance, quite obviously, in Hunter's own words, and yet Kessler's characterizing it as a last minute thing and religious in nature, because Hunter it says that really it's a dinner ostensibly about the World Food Program, where he was a board member and sometime chairman, and he invited 3 World Food Program USA. It's not the UN related thing, it's a USA program which only collects money from Americans. That's its whole role. So there's absolutely no point with them meeting foreigners. But anyway, that was the cover story, which Hunter said it was a cover story by using the word ostensibly. I don't know if then Kessler doesn't understand what that word means, but Kessler is trying to characterize it as religious because the head of the then Greek Orthodox Church was one of the guests there, who was a family friend of the Bidens. And his son, Michael Karloutzos, who is also a friend of Hunter's, who Hunter was actually talking about doing business with him in Greece. So I don't know how Kessler thinks that is making this whole meeting innocent. It just made it preposterous and embarrassed him and, frankly, the Washington Post.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think it was mere stupidity, but I fear it was deliberate. Miranda, we need 100 people like you doing this kind of work, because we're at a time where somebody needs to cast a critical spotlight on the government. Very few people are doing it. You're one of them. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dinesh. It's a pleasure.